Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. Welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet of Portsmouth City Council. Just in terms of health and safety things, I expect, there is, as I understand, no fire alarm expected, so if there's one that goes, it's real, and we need to meet by Queen Victoria. This meeting is being live streamed, so if members of the public don't wish to be on camera, could you let us know? If you work for the council or you're a councillor, tough, you don't get the choice. Thank you very much indeed for coming. So if we quickly run round the table, and I think what we might do as well is to run round people at the back as well, just to make sure that we know what you're here for, just to make sure that we get the right people for the right things, if that's okay. So I'm Gerald Van Jackson, I'm leader of the council. You'll need to push your button, Bio.
Sorry. I'm Councillor Steve Pitt. I'm the Deputy Leader of the Council and Cabinet Member for Culture, Leisure and Sport.
Councillor Rob Wood, Cabinet Member for Children and Families.
Ben Dowling, Cabinet Member for Planning, Regeneration and Economic Development.
Dave Ashmore, Cabinet Member for Environment and Community Safety.
Susie Horton, Cabinet Member for Education.
Darren Sanders, Cabinet Member for Housing.
Matthew Wennington, Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care.
Tristan Samuels, Director of Regeneration.
Julian Pike, Deputy Director of Finance.
Michael Other, Deputy Chief Executive and City Solicitor.
John Miles Smith, Democratic Services.
Lynn Stagg, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation.
Hello, folks. We've got a full agenda, so let's see if we can run through. So first of all, apologies. I got apologies from Jeanette Smith, who is not well.
And Leader, apologies for needing to leave at 1:20. We have a government department coming down to revisit today.
I hope we will all have left by that time. The late Chief Executive. David, welcome. We're at date of next meeting. Declarations of interest, colleagues. Anything? Anybody declarable interest? No. Colleagues, record decisions of minutes of 27th of November and 4th of December. Colleagues, are you happy with these? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Education, Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel review into school attendance and part-time timetables in Portsmouth. Mike, hello and welcome.
Hello.
I'm sure you have a few short words.
Yes, I'm happy to run through all the recommendations. No, okay, but I thought you might say that. I think what I would say is that we really welcomed the recommendations from the panel. As you see in the report, we've addressed all those recommendations. Yep. And in fact, we appreciated the rigour by which the panel addressed those issues. And from that, a number of actions have come forward. So, for example, our work around pupils going on into elective home education. For some, it is effective for them, and there is good support for those children who are in elective home education. But we know that for many, we have concerns about the appropriateness of that provision, and we have now introduced a new protocol, which our head teachers are fully on board with, which means that we're, I think, going to see less children going into elective home education in the future, and those that do go into that format of education will be appropriate. So that was, I think, a really helpful way forward. And the other thing we've been doing over the last 6 months, and the panel helped with this, is the challenge we've been putting to schools, particularly around reduced timetables that go beyond 6 weeks, but that also leads into discussions around fixed-term exclusions. And again, we've seen a rise in these areas, but again, I think with that challenge now we're putting in place, the rigour of that challenge, and indeed the positive response we had from head teachers, all goes well for the future. So thank you to the panel for your support and recommendations.
Susie, as Cabinet Member, do you want a few short words?
I will do a few short words. First of all, I just wanted to place on record my thanks to the committee, although I was on it at the beginning, so I don't know if I'm thanking myself, but when I walked in this role, I came off the committee. But what was really good was I was there at the beginning when the intentions were set, and it's really nice to see this report, so thank you. Second point, I guess what I want to make is, when it comes to attendance, this is really part of a bigger picture and a big complex picture. We all agree that we want children to be receiving the best education for them, and taking into account their individual needs. And just a couple of specific things. One is in relation to the comment on the attendance campaign, and just to say it's really pleasing to be able to say that we have evaluated a kind of the first phase of it. We're going into a second phase where we're particularly focusing on ill health and the relationship between that and attending school. And I'd also like to place on record my thanks to schools who've really engaged with the first phase of the campaign. It took a while to sort of warm up, but actually, particularly the hashtag Miss School Miss Out is being used on a daily basis on social media in particular for all sorts of things beyond just maths and English lessons, so that both parents and children realise that when you miss out on school, you miss out on loads of stuff rather than just individual lessons. So just the point on that. And the other thing is, it's to touch on what Mike is saying around rigour and that balance between rigour but also meeting the needs of individual pupils, and particularly around definable groups around special educational needs, alternative provision around, relating to that, and, as Mike has said, elected home education. So we want to push forward with an aspirational message about school attendance, but also be there, being rigorous and making as many children be in a high quality education as possible. Thank you.
And can I just add one more thing, just to say, again, it was really helpful in terms of the recommendations to support the school attendance campaign, which we kicked off in October, and as Susie has said, that's already starting to bear some fruit. If you haven't seen the sort of images, these are the sort of things that are going out. So there's the aspirational one in terms of looking into the mirror and looking at the future, and then a rather more challenging one around a child walking on a tightrope above a circle of sharks. A little bit controversial, but actually it's done the right thing. It's created a debate and a clear message.
Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. And I think, from my point of view, I think there are different groups of children who are not in school, and I think there are a group where parents take a really well thought through, conscious decision of what's right for their child, and I think that's one group we have to work with in one way. I think the other bit that we need to be very worried about is the number where schools are using, instead of doing expulsions and exclusions, encouraging parents to remove their children from school where the school is not happy with them because they want to get better exam results and therefore be up the league tables. And that is the area where we really need to work very, very hard to make sure that kids are not out on the streets and they are in school getting the skills that they need. And we need to be very intolerant of schools pushing kids out because their kids need to be there. So I think there are different approaches to different bits of it, and some of the national research has been interesting. Colleagues, are we happy with this report as it is? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay. Thank you, Mike. Okay, item 5, Health and Social Care Operating Model. Innes, do you wish to come and wax lyrical? Do you want to push the button? so we hear your words of wisdom.
Okay.
I'm sure Matt will also want to have a word, but...
I'll let him go first.
Okay, thank you. So very briefly, in the spirit of the meeting, Portsmouth has a very well established of bringing together its health and social care functions and its public health functions. When you go and have a look at how other areas are tackling it, you are reminded at how far we have come in Portsmouth. That is across all ages, adults, children, and also public health functions. And what this paper is doing is recommending that we go a bit further on that in the city formally. I won't go through the recommendations, they're in the paper. I think it comes at the right time. The NHS long-term plan has now been published just a few weeks ago. It sets a direction from the NHS. It acknowledges the strong integration that is required with local government. But as always, it leaves a lot of questions unanswered, and what this paper does, it gives us an opportunity in the city to answer our questions and set how we wish it to be delivered in the city ahead of any nationally imposed direction as well. I think we shouldn't underestimate the strong arrangements we already have in place, and what this does is it says, why don't we bring together some of our formal functions around adults, around children's and around public health between the CCG and the City Council on a much more formal and established arrangement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Matt?
Yeah, and I'd like to thank you, Innes, and I'd really like to thank everyone who's put this together. This is the culmination of some considerable time of working together across the CCG and the City Council. This all, as Innes has mentioned, all fits in with the NHS's plans for the future, and by us doing effectively leading the way and doing far more integration than many other places, certainly in Hampshire, this is really putting us ahead of the curve. But also it's making some really sensible solutions by ending the split between some of the functions that are CCG functions and some of the council functions, not just in where we have Innes who oversees both for the CCG and the City Council already in terms of adult social care, but also we have the situation around the public health splits and the children's splits, and looking to have those roles going across both the CCG and the City Council is really good. And I think the really important thing here is that if we don't go ahead like this, then we are likely to get imposed from outside. So this gives us a real future-proofing for not just this area, but also it helps us lead to our neighbours in South East Hampshire and Fareham and Gosport in terms of how we work with, how they can see us working together well, and that we can take them along with us as well. But then looking to us as effective as exemplar. But this also has the advantage. This has gone to Health and Wellbeing Board already, and the really positive thing is about the way that people from across the council and across the CCG have been really positive about this, and also the hospital and elsewhere as well, and the Primary Care Trust, that we're all working together really well.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
With the portfolio for children, I have to agree with my colleague in this is very good, because in a way it also reflects what we're trying to do with young people out there. They don't suddenly become adults. It is a journey, so having a structure that reflects what happens in real life about the transitions is going to be very good for all involved, because they'll have an oversight of that supposed transition without it being a silo. Thank you.
Okay. I think this is good as the next step. I think we need to be going much, much further and fast, because I think if we don't do it fast, something will be done to us that may not be what we want. We got together a group of leaders from health and social care for a working dinner with the Lord Mayor downstairs, and I'm very grateful that Judith came as well as Matt. Unfortunately, Luke Stubbs wasn't able to, but we were very keen to make sure it was cross-party. And where I would want us to get to, and get to pretty fast, is that once the budgets have been decided in terms of allocation, the decision in terms of allocating money and commissioning money out, I think should be a joint meeting between the portfolio for adult social care and the chair of the CCG, and in then the children's area, the cabinet member for children and the chair of the CCG. If we can get to the point pretty fast where we are jointly commissioning and using our budgets in a joint way, that is very good. But again, that is only another step, and there is much more to do. And I think we're lucky that with David's knowledge, and David Williams as chief exec, his knowledge of the health area, we're very lucky. But I think this is great and happy to support it, but this needs to be a step, and there's a lot further to go in really quite quick time. So David, we might need to leave that with you to progress, because it crosses portfolios and things, but it is a very major piece of work, and if we're not careful, Portsmouth will be subsumed within Hampshire, and we always know what that means. It means residents in Portsmouth get a worse service because we get the views of the county don't tend to take us into account.
Chairman, can I suggest then, I agree with all of that, and I think this is a huge issue for the council, and I think continued reluctance from central government to address the issues around social care. Can I suggest then that, I've just lost my recommendation, that the committee might be willing to add a recommendation to those that are on the agenda sheet? Tell us what it is. Just to ask that I work with the accountable officer for the CCG to consider further opportunities for integration consistent with the long-term plan of the NHS, and bring those proposals to the Health and Wellbeing Board at the earliest opportunity.
I think you need to bring them here as well.
Happy to do that.
But Health and Wellbeing Board is fine. But I think we have to be the masters of our own destiny, because if we don't, other things will be done to us that may not be what's good for Portsmouth and the people of the city. Colleagues, are you happy with that amendment? Yes. Thank you very much indeed. Now, on the bottom of page 2, you might notice it says local plan update, item 6, but it's kind of hidden. So thank you very much indeed. Ben, you have who is going to assist you, or are you going to sing to it yourself?
I believe Paul Barton and Toby Ailing are here to present.
Okay.
I'll comment
Toby,
afterwards.
Paul, who's going to I think, Toby, you're looking as if you'd drawn the straw. Okay? Fire away.
Right, thank you. I will also try and be brief, but
Excellent.
just cover the main points. So the paper members have is an update for the local plan process. I'll just run through the main elements and end obviously on the recommendations. The paper starts with a brief update on the ongoing changes to national planning policy and how those are anticipated to be confirmed by the government going forward. This is all really bedding down with us at the moment, but the key headlines are things such as confirmation of the very high housing need figure that we get out of the government standard methodology, and the paper compares that to recent rates of delivery and previous statements of need that we've prepared ourselves. The plan isn't all about housing, but it's a key driver and a key consideration for how we address that going forward, and those government changes are described there. The document then goes on to talk about Tipner and the future of that part of the city. Obviously, members will know the future of this area has been discussed for many years, not least since the signing of the city deal some 5 years ago, with government to look at bringing in former MOD land and other regeneration initiatives to bring things forward. The paper brings us up to date with some of the work for this local plan, so it was consulted on as part of our issues and options consultation, where we had an early look at that future of the area, and it's summarised there in paragraph 312 what people said and the issues to be addressed. What the paper then goes on to describe is further work that's been undertaken under the city deal to look at options and ways in which Tipner could be brought forward. It talks about the city has a range of competing needs for housing, employment land, community infrastructure and other uses, and obviously we've got limited scope to deliver those. Also, there's a look at how Tipner itself provides the opportunity to deliver additional homes, coupled with the potential for a deep water frontage with our strategically important marine and maritime industries. It is an opportunity here. The report then outlines one of the options that's come forward in the City Deal project, which is a super peninsular option. Quite a grand title, but it's basically introducing the concept of land reclamation from Portsmouth Harbour as a significant element of bringing this area forward. The creation of additional land here would create potential for a larger area for development, which does two things. First of all, it enables additional needs to be met. Also, it enables a more sustainable neighbourhood to be created with a wider range of uses. We've got more land, we've got more room to play with, we can actually achieve a real neighbourhood for the city. However, the report goes on in some length to outline that the significance of this move should not be underestimated. Portsmouth Harbour is a sensitive location. The harbour is a European designated site for nature conservation, and we have to be very clear that we make clear to you members that this is a significant step for us, and this is why the tests and the outline and what we would need to go through are outlined in some detail in this report. However, the opportunity we feel is worth further investigation. Therefore, at this point, we're recommending that members let us take out an initial formal consultation on the super peninsular concept to be undertaken, and this enables us to talk to local communities as well as other interests, nature conservation interests, other harbour users and so on and so forth about what could be achieved. And this is to enable the results of this consultation to build on our early work so that we scope out how we go from here. A short summary document's been prepared to form the basis of this. Needs a little further tweaking and refinement, but we are asking for permission to do that under Cabinet member approval. And the aim is really to have a public-facing consultation for 6 weeks in February and March, complete with manned exhibitions aimed at the local communities there, as well as a more technical discussion with other key bodies concurrently. We'll then take the results back to members in the early part of the summer, and we map out where we go from here.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Toby. Ben, as Cabinet member.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Toby, for presenting. I think there are just a couple of things I would say. What we're approving today is a series of consultation, so this is in no way the local plan. I think that needs to be made very clear to the public, because quite often when we publish draft planning documents for consultation, and in particular when we're doing evidence-based consultation, that is sometimes mistaken for this is what the council wants to do. This is very much not us saying this is what the council wants to do. This is us saying we've done some evidence. What is your opinion of this evidence, and how do we move forward with that? One of the bits of evidence that will potentially come up as controversial is the Housing Economic Land Availability Assessment. This is something which is very much a tool for us as a local planning authority to demonstrate to central government that we have looked at every possible site. What it absolutely is not is us as a council saying this is where we think we should have development in terms of housing. It's absolutely not. It's not a site allocations document. This is a very broad brush of us demonstrating to other bodies that we have done everything we can. So whilst we could look at it as local people and say we absolutely know the situation for each and every one of these sites, that's not its purpose. Its purpose is to demonstrate to central government and to particularly our neighbouring authorities, so Fareham, Gosport, Havant, that we have done everything we can to demonstrate our ability to deliver housing in the future, and that comes into our duty to cooperate when it comes to housing numbers moving forward. So this is very much a tool for us to demonstrate that we can't take lots more housing, but can sometimes be mistaken to mean the opposite of that, and we need to be very clear within ourselves and within the council and with the public that this is not a site allocations document, and we're very much focusing on creating the largest evidence base we can, and it's good practice to put that evidence base out for public sight and public overview, which is what we're doing.
Okay, all right, thank you very much indeed. Quick bits from me, I think. Actually, no, Paul, you'd like to add a little something, would you? Ben's done it. Excellent. Okay. For me, I think there's 3 bits out of it. The first is tip, which Tipner West is an area that's been earmarked for a while. It seems sensible to try to go out to make that a bit bigger by going out to the low water mark, because that makes it a significant area of development without trying to cram more stuff in the city. The bit that worries me a lot is on page 97, where it talks about the numbers of houses that we're going to be expected to produce. So the government's standard methodology of housing needs, as I understand it, has nothing to do at all with what the needs are in Portsmouth. It is just a number that the government are choosing to impose on us about how many houses need to be developed. And it's 320 extra houses or flats a year over and above what the council, what's been built in the city over the last 6-7 years. And I've no idea how the government think we're going to produce that number. It's entirely unrealistic, completely without any basis of local need at all, and it's just a government target that's imposed on us. And I think we have to be very clear about that, and it is not the right thing to be doing. And the last thing is, I've had a request to see if we can get a small cross-party working group to work on the local plan together. And I think that seems a sensible thing to do. I've talked to the Cabinet member, and that seems a sensible thing to do. I don't know if we need to do this as a formal recommendation or whether we just do it, but it seems to be a piece of work that is logical that we work together on. So that's my penny of it. Darren?
Thank you, Gerald. Just agreeing with what you were saying, yet again, we have a gap between the figures that we're given in terms of the homes we can build and our capacity as a city to deliver them. I've already spoken to the Ministry about this and about how we can work with them to try and overcome their desire to deliver an unsustainable target and our desire to actually deliver communities, not concrete. And I think that's one of the things we've got to do as we're going forwards. I suspect we should return to that in a bit. As the housing team own various bits of land across the place, I suspect it may fall to the housing team to do some of the duty of cooperating that Ben rightly referred to earlier on. But that is something that's come from needs that we're being given more homes than we can deliver. The only other question for Ben is that as four of us sit on the Milton Neighbourhood Plan team, I just wanted his ideas on where we are in relation to that, and also whether he's had any discussions or will be having any discussions with them about it going forwards.
Ben, yeah.
The Milton Neighbourhood Plan is something that's been going for a number of years and is volunteer-led by residents in Milton as an area, and it has significant future planning sites, including St James's Hospital and the University Langston campus. They are in regular dialogue with the planning policy team within the council, and as recently as last week, myself and Toby met with the chair and a couple of other members of the neighbourhood planning team about their next steps. They hope to be going out to public consultation very soon, in the next few months. As it stands, it looks like there shouldn't be any points of contention between our emerging local plan and the emerging Milton Neighbourhood Plan. And the council is doing everything it can to be supportive of that process, because the ethos of localism and devolution is one that we are very supportive of.
Okay. Thanks. And finally, Matt?
Yeah, I'd just like to specifically comment on the potential super peninsula plan. Just as the council's representative on the Southern Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority, I like the fact it's really good to have this out in the open and giving plenty of opportunity for all those environmental bodies, etc., to have those to have that consultation, so we can really have an informed view of whether that is practical and whether it's viable in terms of mitigation you have to do.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. After that debate, colleagues, are you happy with the recommendations and are happy to do a cross-party working group to help that? Lovely, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 7, PCC budget. Jules, anything you want to add to it?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. The report sets out the administration's budget and council tax proposals for consideration here today by Cabinet and onward transmission to full council.
Colleagues, our job is to send this on to full council, but I'd just like to highlight a few things in here that I think are worth noting. I think, colleagues, you know that there's been significant pressure in the children's social care budget, so we're over £6 million overspent within that budget. It's an area where you can't say no to children coming into care because we haven't got the money. You just have to find other ways of doing it, and that's what's happened. I'm pleased that what this report says is that we're trying to address that in the long term. So next year, the cash limit will be increased for children's social care by £4 million. £1 million of that is just for one-off to get things moving, but £3 million of that is then built into their base budget forever. And they're the only part of the council where there've been no ask in terms of savings. We need to keep an eye very carefully on that area to make sure that we do get value for money, but I think this is a recognition that there is a huge pressure on not just us, but every council around the country. In terms of adult social care, there is more money going into adult social care, some of it from government, some of it from our own resources, and again, that is a good thing to be doing to make sure that we're able to have a more realistic budget. I think I'm very grateful to the work that's gone on within the finance department. Even with those pressures in adults, children social care and children's social care, the projection at the end of the year is that the council will not have spent any of its reserves on those, that they will have been sorted out in different ways, so there's no net loss of reserves, so sensible financial management, even in times of really quite difficult pressures. And lastly, I think the thing that's worth highlighting is that every year the council has a target of savings that we're asked to make sure that we balance the budget. In the report last year, it said that the savings target would be 4 million, 4 million and 4 million for the next 3 years. We're year one of that. This report says that that's now changed. And so that with the savings target for future years will be 2.5 million, not 4 million, which I think is a significant progress and makes us in a very, very different place to Southampton, where the target, I understand, next year is 11 million for them, which is very, very tough for them to do. So I think those are all helpful and useful things. Our job here is just to pass it on to full council. Colleagues, are you happy to do that? Okay. Moving on, item 8. Now, Chris, do I need to... not Chris, Jules. We need to do a small amendment to this. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Do you want to read your amendment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Since the report was circulated, we would like to add recommendations number 12 and 13, namely recommendation 12 that the Section 151 officer, in consultation with the leader, be given delegated authority to borrow as necessary for the joint venture limited liability partnership which is established to deliver the city centre redevelopment as described in the report to the Cabinet on the 5th of February 2019 entitled City Centre Regeneration. Recommendation 13 be added, which says that prior to any borrowing described in recommendation 12 above, a full business case and financial appraisal is prepared that can satisfactorily demonstrate with good certainty that cost savings, stroke additional income or value uplift of the development which will accrue directly to the council will at least cover the cost of that borrowing on a sustained basis over the lifetime of the borrowing undertaken. These two additional recommendations, along with the recommendations already published in the report, again are presented for consideration by Cabinet and onward transmission to full council.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Darren.
Thank you, Gerald, and thank you, Julian. Just as a small matter of process, the recommendations are in connection with an item we haven't discussed yet. So I'm looking at the city solicitor to go, essentially we're being asked to almost prejudge the outcome of the meeting, three items down the line.
I completely disagree.
Okay.
If we decide later in the agenda not to go forward with it,
right,
then the permission we've given ourselves to do something isn't...
So that falls anyway?
Yeah.
Okay, that wasn't clear from the amendment. Thank you for that clarification, Gerald.
Thank you. Just in terms of where we are with the capital report, I think it's worth, again, this is being sent on to full council for decision next week. I think it's worth highlighting some things here. It's very good to see the investment in additional school places being built in the city, and my thanks to Susie and the team for that. So that's over £8 million going in to create new school places, which is really, really important. Money going in to repair schools as well. The investment in the port will, we hope, see many more cruise ships turning up, because we will level berth 2, and that then we can also do some work to make sure that they can get, the passengers can get in and out of cruise ships more easily, and that's going to bring forward hopefully an extra 100 calls a year by ships. And if we're doing turnarounds, and these are some of the smaller ships, we're not competing with Southampton to do the huge Cunards and Carnivals, etc. That's not what we're able to do. But that's potentially very good and profitable. The investment in the port looks if it's going to turn round MMD and also produce a significant extra income into the City Council for the new contracts that are coming in, and my thanks to Mike Sellers and all the team for doing that. The extra care sheltered accommodation for people with dementia on the Edinburgh House site is in here, and a hugely useful resource that's going to be 50 beds on what is now a 30-bed unit, and providing that extra service for families looking after a loved one who's got dementia. The investment in the pyramids to try to make sure that it's a better experience for residents who take their kids there, and to make sure that's a sustained attraction for the future. And finally, for me, one of the things that's closest to my heart is investing in homes for people who are homeless. I think we've been often told here that the council should be investing in buying Waitroses in Somerset or whatever. Actually, I think investing in homes for the homeless in this city is an overriding thing and a really high priority. And to be clear, my view is £1 million is the start, not the end of that sort of investment. So those are the things that, but it'll be decided at full council. Welcome, Claire. Different coloured hair. So colleagues, anything else on capital before we send it elsewhere? No. Okay, colleagues, are you happy with that? Thank you. Thank you very much, Julian. Standing Order 58, David, do you want to walk us through this? Oh, Michael, all right.
I haven't actually anything to add. Leader, you could see that authority was given to enable the Chief Executive to exercise delegate authority. This was cross-party in accordance with standing orders. That included authority from yourself, from Councillor Donald Jones, Councillor Steve Pitt, Councillor Frank Jonas and Councillor Stephen Morgan. I'm not at liberty to actually discuss in open session the details of the claim which we resolved. If members wish further information, I'm happy to provide that outside this meeting or in exempt session. The matter has, however, now been successfully concluded on favourable terms for the Council.
Okay, Coach, you happy to move on? Okay, we need an additional Cabinet meeting on the 26th of February, just to get this into play, and we've got quite an important issue to bring to that meeting, which is very important. Okay, colleagues, we've got items 11, 12 and 13. My suggestion is, because they're both 11 and 13 are linked, if we could have one debate about both. In terms of item 13, we're being asked to exclude press and public. My intention would be that we pass this in terms of making sure that the report remains confidential, but if people can keep the debate to not referring to things within the confidential appendix or the confidential section in terms of 13, we can then have the whole of the debate in public session to be as open as possible. Otherwise, we would have to, Cal, for instance, would want to speak, would speak and then we'd have to throw him out, and we'd prefer not to do that. So, is that, colleagues, are you happy for that?
you watching yourself for a moment?
No. Rob has been watching himself. So colleagues, are you happy with that? So Tom, you're looking uncomfortable. Okay. Okay. Cal, so we've got colleagues coming to join us. Cal, do you want to, and Judith, and Claire, you're here. Do you want to come and do in person what you did in writing? So do come and grab seats at the front, folks, and come and join us. So we'll need one more chair. There we are. Okay. Now, do you want a paper copy of what you said so you can say it? I'm sure, there we are, Matt's got a copy for you. Okay, so first up, can we move, and just tell me, Michael, if I've done the right thing, can I move the exclusion of the press and public in relation to item 13 and the report, but that we will try to have the debate in open session, but ask people not to refer to things within that. Is that right, Michael?
That's absolutely fine, Leader.
Lovely, okay. And that we'll do item 11 and item 13 together, as the two seem to me to be inextricably linked. So, colleagues, if we go through, I don't know, left to right, right to left, age before beauty.
Leader, the public. Perhaps one of the lead officers could just give a broad brush introduction before you hear what
that would be very
others have to
helpful,
say.
very sensible. Okay, so Tristan.
Chair, I'm happy to do a quick summary of both papers.
Lovely,
for you.
thank you very much indeed.
So the first paper, number 11, is the procurement of the contract for City Centre Road. This was an OJU compliant procurement in a competitive environment. The paper has a conclusion around for us to enter into a zero value framework for the design and build of the road. The road is a piece of strategic infrastructure, and I know you feel this is very closely linked to city centre, but it is also part of the wider plans for development in the city. The framework allows us to get the contractor on board, do some early engagement with the contractor around redesign, and also look at surveys. It's not an automatic that we will proceed and start to do work on the road. We will need to do that first bit of work first, and it's also subject to some of the design work with some of the developers in the area. That's number 11.
Yeah.
Number 13, the city centre regeneration heads of terms. Obviously, there's a long history with this. Previous schemes, everyone will remember. In previous years, we had a development agreement that didn't work out, and part of that is due to the way development agreements are set up in terms of passing on the risk, and some of that's about where the markets were, and we are all very conscious of the history of this. The focus for the council is around the wider city centre. It isn't just around these sites, but the heads of terms do focus on the specific land holdings, both our own and Delancey's. And that proposes that we start work together in a joint venture fashion about coming up with a strategy to develop and support the city centre.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Judith, should we start with yourself and move to the right?
They want me to go first.
Or are you going to do Claire first and move to the left?
First, then Cal, and then
Lovely, okay. Welcome.
Hello, how are you all?
Extremely.
So this is the first time I feel like I can be really critical within my role as a councillor, which is quite nice. I've waited long enough. We've all been getting on for the last 9 months, but I feel like this might change things a little bit between us. Oh, I'm really nervous. There you go. Whilst I accept the need to regenerate the area where the tricorn resides, and look at this funky pin badge I'm wearing right now of the tricorn, costs £9, it's great, it's awesome. I do urge, I'm hugely upset about the way that this has been handled, and I urge the Cabinet to reconsider their recommendations today to allow for a few more things to happen. I've only heard about this project last week after Cabinet papers were released, and Cal WhatsApped me in the middle of the night, and I went, oh my God, at my phone whilst I was reading the Cabinet agenda. So I need to kind of accept for myself is that I'm not particularly educated person. People might miss things like this, and it's in my ward, and I feel like I should have known, not maybe from the start, because I've only been here for like 9 months, but for a longer degree than 6 days. So I'm the ward member for Charles Dickens, as you know, and I was not briefed about the proposals. What's more, as Labour opposition or for Pred, Councillor Smythe was also not briefed, which suggests that very first instance there's quite a lot of simple due diligence that wasn't even followed, and to be fair shows a little bit of incompetence from the council. Also, there has been no public consultation per se. I know we had that city centre thing last year before I became a councillor, but that was more talking about the land around in front of McDonald's and making that pedestrianised and stuff. I remember that because I was still not a councillor then, but I went to that event at Cascades. But also something of which I think should go on. Also, there's been no public consultation per se, something of which I think should go on before the council makes huge decisions to go on with a joint venture. This development could potentially create effectively a new town in my ward, and I deal with 4 small areas already in Charles Dickens, and we could have a few thousand people moving in. And it's already probably the biggest ward in the city, isn't it? Next to maybe Drayton and Farlington. Is it Drayton and Farlington second? I don't know. One of them. I do not inherently agree going into this joint venture because I'm a little bit anti-capitalist. I'm a socialist. I feel like everything should be brought in. I like saying anti-capitalist on camera. It's great, isn't it? Right? but more to the point, I feel like everything should be handled in-house. We can develop a new town that can be significantly more social and affordable housing than around 12% social offering that's been going on at Elephant and Castle that Delancey have put forward. I know it changes every time. I have to Google the news every day to try and get right figured. It must be mentioned in the aforementioned development at Elephant Castle has been met with considerable opposition, considering the fact that they only want to practically erase a community and instead put homes offering those pretty much earning 60,000 or more in London and kick local business out. Delancey also employ precarious tax procedures and isn't owned by a Tory tax donor as well. So there you go, that's one reason not to use them either. I did include some extra stuff that's from Private Eye about DV4 and stuff about their tax affairs, and I hope that was circulated as well. This development is also really similar to the Haringey development vehicle, which almost completely collapsed, like made a Labour council collapse last year. It's ground to a halt because of massive opposition from local residents campaigners. Whilst the Tricorn site is empty, we've had promises for the last 15 years over the site. I never wanted it to go. A lot of people never wanted it to go. I always joked that I wanted Tipner development to be like a hybrid of Thamesmead and Barbican Centre. That would be awesome because brutalism is back, to be fair. And I want housing as much as the next person, and a new thriving little town would be great, but I do not see this viable as how it stands. I also consider this plan to be significantly rushed and a pet project for the Cabinet member for Pred before he may or may not move on to other ventures within his councillorship. Sorry, Ben. So, number 1, I asked to do the following things. Number 1, do not enter into a joint venture with DV4/Delancey. Number 2, end the lease of land with the company and take it back. Number 3, investigate with the relevant departments within the council to start an in-house team to kickstart the development of the Tricorn site. Number 4, fully consult with all members and all residents in a 1 kilometre radius over what they want to happen to the site. Maybe you should even put it citywide, to be fair. Number 5, for all relevant information to be gathered and then be presented to full council to decide. If you are not willing to budge on these proposals, then I ask you to consider number 5. I think this should be debated with full council. You also need to be mindful, and this is the horrible bit from me, and I know we're all friends, but I feel like this needs to be said. You should also be mindful that we could very well have a socialist-led council in Portsmouth in the next few years, and if we have developers like Delancey here planning to do to Portsmouth that they have done in similar developments, especially in London, and there's a real possibility this joint venture could be at serious jeopardy. We need homes, we need a great deal of social and affordable housing. I loathe to trust the agreements you are seeking to enter, and we certainly need more time to look into this. So thank you for listening to me.
Okay.
That was my TED talk, Jules.
Thank you very much indeed. Cal, welcome.
Hello, my name is Cal Courtcreef. For those that don't know me, I'm a local resident in the ward in question, Charles Dickens, and I'm also the Labour Party coordinator for our area. So the report before us today proposes transferring significant amounts of council-owned land, publicly owned land, into a joint venture where 50% stake will be held by the Mayfair property investment firm Delancey. There's not been any consultation with local residents and taxpayers over the plans, and I really think that we deserve a say in how our public assets are going to be managed. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately as it may be, I'm one of those sad people who does regularly check the calendar on the council website and looks at the agenda for upcoming meetings. And that is how I came across the plans for this joint venture. I quickly contacted the ward councillors in my area, none of whom were aware of the plans, and tried to spread a bit of awareness on social media so people were aware of what was happening in their name. Also last week I attended Heartland's Community Voice, which is a residents group in Lamport, the area I live in, and also covers Buckland as well. It's kind of hangover from the SRB days when we actually invested in communities like this, and they had a bit of money and a little bit of power. They've still got a tiny bit of money, but not very much power. And this is something that was a real, not this particular discussion, but the general idea of development in Portsmouth was something that they talked about a lot. And they really talked about feeling just disempowered. They said, going back a decade, 15, 20 years, they felt that they had a real say in their local community, that they were consulted over what was happening there, that the council always wanted to come along to their meetings and speak to them, but they felt like this wasn't the case anymore. And I thought this was just a good example to point to, because I know for a fact the people in that room, who were mainly social housing tenants, people on low incomes, but real passionate for their community, were only 400 metres away from where this proposed development is going to be, and none of them have been spoke to about their views on what they think is going to happen. Now, I accept, and it's been put forward to me, that perhaps people don't really care about the organisational form. It's the end product they care about, so there's no point consulting with people about the organisational form. But then, like Claire pointed to, I think we need to look at the example of the Haringey development vehicle that did bring down a council administration because of mass protest over the organisational form, and that was a joint venture, and my understanding very much in a similar vein to the one that's been proposed here today. I think that ultimately this is about, one way of looking at it is the privatisation of public land. This is currently publicly owned, publicly controlled land, and we're on about putting it into a new company or joint venture or organisation, whatever you want to call it, where 50% of that say over what happens to that land is going to be controlled by a large, private company. And I think there needs to be a public discussion over whether that's the best way forward or not. So the suggestion of the creation of this new joint venture will allow development of in the north of commercial roads at the former Tricorn site and developing sites to move forward, which is obviously something I'm in favour of and is very much in the interest of local community development happening on that site. But for me, one of the big issues here is that there seems to have been little or no consideration to whether this project could be wholly owned and managed by the council, given it already has a significant competitive advantage of being the landowner. Why is it that the council is capable of building a brand new industrial wind park in Havant and managing commercial properties across the country from Somerset to Yorkshire, but it hasn't considered in detail whether it could bring forward a key strategic development at the heart of our own city, rather than having to rely on profit-seeking property developers? It seems to me this approach is back to front. Why not look at whether the council has the capacity and ability to bring forward the scheme first, then if not, go down the route of exploring the joint venture? It's also been suggested to me that the joint venture isn't set in stone at this stage. Whatever's decided today could potentially be backtracked from, and then the council could explore whether it wishes to look at alternatives. But to be honest, I'm not entirely convinced by how easy it's going to be to withdraw from a major kind of joint venture of this size with a company like Delancey. It seems to me there's an imbalance of power here between the council and the kind of size and power that Delancey has, and I'm not convinced that they would make it kind of possible for us to withdraw if we wish to at some point in future. The kind of last point I wanted to talk about really is the thing for me that's number one priority and I'm always banging on about, and it's affordable and social housing. So it's again been suggested to me through discussions with the Cabinet member responsible that Delancey have indicated they wish to provide significant levels of affordable housing on any new development arising for this joint venture. But those assurances are all very well and good. I don't see any mention of them in this report. Is there anything in writing? How can we hold these people to account? What happens further down the line, once we've put our public land into this joint venture and they suddenly say, oh, look, we know the policy's 30%, but here's an economic viability assessment, we can only do 10% or 5%. Again, exactly what's happened in Elephant and Castle, where Delancey have been involved in a major dispute with the Mayor's office over the level of affordable housing that's going to be provided there, and in the end it's been underwritten, and the final agreement, my understanding, is significantly less than the policy compliant levels. And this is public land. I believe that we should be pushing for more than the policy compliant levels, not the minimum of the policy compliant or less. This is council owned lands. Why aren't we saying that 50% of any residential housing there should be affordable housing? Why are we just accepting for 30% or less? And then, of course, leads us on to, which I won't go into too much detail, what we mean by affordable housing, how the rent's going to be set. Is this going to be another Ivy Close, where the rents are pretty much the same as the private sector, or are we going to have genuinely affordable council housing on this land? So yeah, I've talked about the example of Elephant Castle. There's also the example of the Olympic Village, which Delancey were also involved in, another controversial property deal where the properties were acquired from the public purse for quite cheap rates, and Delancey subsequently made hundreds of millions of pounds in profit on that scheme. I think we also need to look at the ownership of Delancey in the management structure, and I know that the Jamie Rickblatt, the owner, who's also the son of Sir John Rickblatt, one of the biggest landowners of the country, it's been reported they've been quite significantly linked to quite aggressive forms of tax avoidance. So I'd ask us, is this a company that we feel is reputable and we want to put our trust in as a council? So, in conclusion, I believe these proposals should be paused while significant public consultation over the proposed privatisation is undertaken and a feasibility study regarding the council developing the site itself is produced. These proposals will have a major and lasting impact upon our community, and it's vital that we do all we can to bring forward this development in a way that empowers local residents and ensures that their best interests are looked after, not those of wealthy property developers. Thank you.
Thanks, Cal. Judith.
Thank you both very much. I entirely endorse what they've both said. We obviously have had a brief opportunity to discuss this proposal as a group, and I would like to build on what they've both said here, with my conclusion being is that we need some sort of delay so that we can have further consultation. And I'm going to speak briefly and clearly because, so I won't repeat anything that you've said, but when this is a complicated scheme, and I fear that the Cabinet are moving into a similar situation that we had 2 or 3 years ago under the Tory administration with the sea defences, that if we consult on just this relatively small amount of land, I have seen the maps and so on, we won't have taken the advantage of consulting at this stage. I know we've got 3 parallel things going on, this land, the master plan for the whole of the city centre extending down to the station and so forth, and of course the context is the local plan. So whilst I can understand why we want to get on with this and get help in this planning stage, and indeed I've used JVs in my past in a housing association, so I understand how they can work, I feel that if we consult on just this small thing and the nature of the deal, and then muddle it up with the consulting on a wider area and consulting in the local plan, that we will the public will find it very difficult to engage, and we won't necessarily then have a clear steer and a clear sense that they're being properly engaged. You know what the public have been like on the sea defences in terms of talking about finding it difficult to distinguish the sea defence from the master plan, and finding it difficult to avoid coming to the conclusion that the public sector is trying to confuse them. I think that's a really good job been done over the summer by that team, and I think we can do it working together again on this scheme. So I fully agree with the conclusion that my 2 colleagues here have come to. There's a question here, the ostensible reason for putting Delancey into JV without doing any kind of, it seems to me, without doing the appropriate due diligence that Cal's findings and Councillor Udi's findings would agree, is that they already have a lease which has got about 50 years to run on a large piece of the land, and second of all, they own significant but small other holdings there. So there is a logic behind that, but I think we do need to recognise that Delancey and everything we read about them are a for-profit, pretty grasping capitalist organisation. And if we do decide to go ahead with them, then we need more in the heads of terms for the joint venture, which is referred to in this document, than we have at present. I've had a look at that. And so I'd like to sort of change gear now from entirely backing my two colleagues to talking about how I think this proposal needs to be amended, and I'd like to be quite detailed on that, please, colleagues. So I'm moving first of all to page 324 when we talk about recommendations, and it says 2.1.
Hold on. I don't want to lose you, Judith. Yep.
This is the
324?
Just to interpret for any of the public interest, noting this is the cover paper that is in the public domain, and it refers to other documents that the leader of the council has already said we won't be considering explicitly here, and I'm fine with that approach. It says here, agree heads of terms for the joint venture LLP with the DVA as proposed in paragraph 2.1. What I don't see clearly enough is the linkage between that statement and what is in the vision and the vision for the city on pages 325 and 326. But I'm assuming, although it doesn't say so in the report, that those are things that are also going into the actual legal agreement, the joint venture agreement. And I'm not sure it does. I think that needs to be looked at and checked, because otherwise we're not publicly agreeing something that can be properly accounted for later on. In particular, the vision, I don't think I disagree, and I shouldn't think my colleagues do with the vision, nor with the statements made in paragraph 3.9, although I would like to say here that if that is going straight into our joint venture agreement, I would like to see a little more emphasis on street markets, events, and an interpretation of what we mean by retail. It would be silly for us to build too many shops here, or have the joint venture build too many shops here, because nationally there is an oversupply of 50% shops. So it's not quite clear from here that you have clear sights on other things other than retail, or that there isn't an emphasis on retail. So that's one of my first points. There may be some tweaking needed to the content of an agreement that would reflect that. More seriously, paragraph 311, these are the two clauses, if they're going into the agreement, that need to be amended in my view. The first is, it says strength under bullet point 4, says strengthen the retail opportunities available for residents by embracing change to traditional high street model to create an environment. Again, it's not about strengthening, I think, the retail offer. It's about getting that down to the size that's necessary for a vibrant place. The second thing, and most seriously, and here I'm picking up on both Cal and Councillor Udi's points, is that we need to put a number on the amount of affordable housing we would expect to see here. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that, and I know quite clearly that this is all up for negotiation. I know that the proposed JV is all about getting plans done, but at the same time, I believe that if we don't put something that says build more high quality private and affordable homes, bringing forward, I think we should say the minimum statement I would think would advisable to say at least 30%, and I would be talking, wanting to move us up 50%. Cal mentioned I was thinking higher, because we are as a city facing a crisis in land for affordable housing. Now, I know that the JV does allow for withdrawal, it allows for renegotiation, it's a 50-50 agreement anyway. I've read those papers and I understand what it's saying. But given what's gone on in Hackney, given what's gone on elsewhere, and given the behaviour of any profit-making developer, if the argument comes down at the end of the day to viability studies on bits of land that they still own, anybody, any developer who's searching out profit will argue with us about the affordable housing. And of course, if we're asking for a lot of additional public realm, additional things that we want in the public good to make it a venue to go to, then we will have to face that argument with them in the public. And we will be accused then, as a public authority, of wasting money in development and of this JV not being properly founded. So I would really urge that if this is gone through with, that we put a percentage or at least an indication that we won't be being unreasonable if we're looking for more affordable housing. Because otherwise it's going to be another of these things where we could have done a lot of planning and then the viability study, and it shows that they are not willing to afford the amount of affordable housing we want. I'm not suggesting any other details go into this, but if we don't signal at this stage, then I think we will find that the public sector as a whole, this isn't a party political point, are brought into disrepute through this JV.
Okay, Judith, we've kind of got a limit of 6 minutes, and I think we're significantly over. Is that all right? Is that okay? Okay, so my penny's worth. I think we need to be realistic that this is a site that has been derelict for a large number of years. So it's in a very different place to some of the discussions about London, which were very... And the push I get from people is just get on and do something. And for too long it's sat there empty. To be absolutely frank, I have a great deal of sympathy with what Cal has said, and Claire. Personally, I would like the council to develop this. The issue we've got is that we don't own the land. That the Tricorn site has got 46 years of a lease left on it, so that so Delancey who own that lease, they have that land for 46 years. And I don't want to be waiting for 46 years before we develop it. Because in effect they can say nothing will happen to it until the end of their lease. So if they would sell it, then the council could buy. My understanding is it's not for sale. So I might in a perfect world wish the council to be the landowner of it all and to do the development, but we're not in that perfect world. So I personally think that the only way forward is by working with the people who own the land. So in some ways this is a privatisation, in other ways this is a nationalisation of land, that they've got 46 years lease on on land which is being put into a joint venture along with the council. So there are different ways of looking at the whole thing. My concern with the council trying to do this development on its own is I'm not sure we've got the skills to do it properly. And much as I'd love to say we can go and do this big site and regeneration all on our own, I'm not sure we've got all of those skills available. And where I don't want to be is sitting here in another 4 or 5 years with a derelict site still, which I think would be terrible for the council. I do think this is very different to those London pieces of land. I absolutely agree that we need to get the maximum affordable housing we can possibly get on it. I don't know the right way of doing that in terms of putting a percentage in, and that might well be the right way, but I need to take advice. My feeling is, and I'm sorry, I'm torn in 2 ways. On the one hand, I want to get on with it and get something going, because it's sat there derelict and empty for too long as a gateway into the city that looks terrible. It doesn't look welcoming. It doesn't give people confidence in Commercial Road, and therefore I really want us to get on and get something done quickly. On the other hand, I can see there is a desire for people to look at this in more detail and for people to be brought along within the process. I don't think we can do this on our own, just because Delancey, who own a lot of the land or lease on it for a long period, want to be part of it. And and writing them out, I just don't think is possible. I might want the council to do it all on its own, but that's just, as far as I can see, is not a possibility. So I think there is an argument for going and spending a bit more time talking with people and see if we can get people onto the same page. The discussion I've had with Tom is I don't understand why the map of the area we're talking about isn't public. And we need to talk to all the landowners. This is not going to be news to anybody who's a landowner there. This is not the first time this area's come up for development, but we haven't been out to them, and out of courtesy, I think we need to tell them before we publish anything. So I think I am moved to the view that a deferral for a bit would be the sensible thing, except if Tristram and colleagues say that is going to wreck the entire thing and it'll stop development.
Chairman, will it wreck things? It certainly pushes things back. It's once again the site has been in a position where nothing's happened for a long period of time. It's going out to have a conversation about the heads of terms, it doesn't really give people a lot to discuss. The heads of terms are a framework where we're going to work on. The plans were to actually come up with some feasibility, some ideas of what people could get their teeth into, some pictures, some massing, so people can start to get a feel for what the offer is. Because right now people are looking at a very bland legal document and not getting a feeling for it. People's views on Elephant and Castle differ. They did 35% affordable there. They've changed a lot of culturally led regeneration. Delancey as a company, I can't speak for their tax affairs, but we did a lot of research on them a couple of years ago, and we were satisfied that DB4 was an acceptable vehicle from the work we did. In terms of the offer that they've done, I mean, Delancey as a company have spent a lot of time down here, being engaged at different levels, been around the city, spent a lot of time with some of you cabinet members, tried to get underneath the skin of the city about the look, the feel, about what regeneration could be. They don't feel like a bad fit compared to what we are. We're not in a position really to go out and do this with anyone else.
Okay, so Stephen and Darren.
Okay, let's try to get some clarity around a few bits of this jigsaw puzzle, because we're looking at one bit of the jigsaw puzzle, and there's actually at least 3 bits to this jigsaw puzzle. So we are looking at the heads of terms. We are not looking, the report's here, but we're not necessarily cross-referencing the city centre road scheme, and what we are definitely not looking at the same time is the city centre master plan. Now the key bit that all 3 of you are concerned about is how we interact with the local community, and so am I, how we look at make sure that there is permeability by that community into any new city centre development, so that we do it with them and not to them, and how we make sure that affordable and social housing provision is at a level that we want to see within this development. That's where the city centre master plan document comes into play. I went to see officers last week. I've discussed it with Ben and I've discussed it with the Regen team. The figures that you want, the guarantees around social and affordable housing, will be in that city centre master plan document, which is still being worked up. Could we have communicated this better? Yes, we could, and yes, we should have done. I think we all understand that, but this is the important bit. The heads of terms can't move forward with any development proposal until we have the city centre master plan, because there's nothing to reference it to. We can't do anything with the road until we know that Delancey are happy with those proposals, and so are we, and that the 2 things link together properly. And until those 2 things link together properly and sit within the city centre master plan and those housing numbers, none of this can happen. But if we'd done this the other way, we would have waited for the city centre master plan, and then we'd have looked at the road viability, and then we'd have entered into heads of terms, and then we'd have come up with a scheme. 5 years plus. What we're trying to do is move something forward quickly. But there is absolutely no chance whatsoever that in a joint venture, Portsmouth City Council's administration is going to agree to ride roughshod over the city centre master plan housing figures that we are currently working on to get into that document to deliver the social and affordable housing that you guys want to see and that we want to see there. So what we maybe haven't done is shown you how those three bits of work put together. I agree we need to have a short deferral on this, but it needs to be a short one. We need to explain what I've just said in a room with people who are concerned about it in a more joined up way. And I think if we can do that, then we can move ahead quite quickly, because you will see that the city centre master plan document will underpin the concerns you have and make sure that that community is consulted with properly.
Darren.
Thank you, Gerald. My experience of these things is probably different to everybody else's in this room. As a councillor in London for 8 years, as a councillor in Lambeth for 8 years, I'm fully aware of what went on the Haygate estate. And my attitude, which is next door to the Elephant and Castle development that Delancey is involved in. And it's part of it, and it's much of the reason why everybody up there got so wound up. Because what happened there is unacceptable. And certainly in everything that we're looking at in future, and certainly everything I'm involved in future, the key thing, as was learnt when I was on the New Deal for Communities body in Clapham Park, was the important thing with estate-led regeneration is you have, as Steve has said, is you have to bring people with you. You have to inform the people that Cal ran into at the Heartlands community vehicles, because I know the blocks like you do. And the important thing is that they're involved in the vision and that they're involved as part of the issue. I disagree, based on my experience in Clapham Park, that the heads of terms is as important as buying into the vision. Based on my experience there and in other places in London, I agree with Steve. The key thing is the master plan to achieve the level of homes Portsmouth people can afford. Note that phrase, not affordable housing, for reasons that some of us have discussed long and hard over several years. The key thing is to make sure that we deliver that. That involves working with people. That involves consulting with people. This development, based upon what Judith was saying around different landowners, is actually not like the Haringey development vehicle you discussed, although I'll come back to that later. It's more like another development in Haringey, which is just round by a tube station. It's called Ward's Corner. And this is a development that has different landowners, different people, and a council, you mentioned, Claire, we could very well have a socialist council in a few years. I'm pretty sure the council in Haringey would call itself socialist, and it has just signed off the deal on Ward's Corner with different landowners. It has upset the Latin American-owned parade of shops, no end up there, but that has been signed off. And again, I want to come back to the development vehicle in a bit. So the key thing is to consult with local people on the vision. I understand Judith's point about strengthening the retail offer, but my view is that this has got to be culturally led. My view is that we're a city that for years has been struggling to find out what our place is in the regional market. We've got Gunwolf, and that's fine. The key thing Steve pointed out about the city centre master plan is also it's not just here, it's got to be commercial road as well. It's all got to work together. And finally, in the local plan, we're starting to make some progress on that. That's good. That, again, is why the master plan is important. So I want to come back to the development vehicle, because I want to come back to and I come back to Claire's point about a socialist council. The view of the socialist council in Haringey, when they decided to scrap the Haringey development vehicle, in their report in July 2018, and I refer to paragraph 4.6 of the report, is that they do not object to any of the objectives in the vehicle. They do not object to the principles of working in the public sector, despite the extensive publicity to the contrary. What they objected to was an assessment of risk. And this, I believe, is different to that vehicle, because this is less around procurement and this is more around, but where I do agree is the assessment of risk. And I think that's absolutely crucial. I think because there are multiple landowners, as Judith and Gerald have outlined, it is absolutely crucial that we do that. The risk is to do nothing. The risk is to incur yet more years of people going, when the hell are you doing something? And that, I think, is unacceptable. I don't think colleagues actually want that. My belief is that there is enough in the documents we can't see, Gerald, to press ahead with this, but if colleagues are happy for a very, very short deferral to try and ensure more people come on board, I'd be happy to put up with that. I understand the comments of people around social housing and affordable housing. I think that's more about the stuff Steve has outlined rather than the heads of terms. I would only say that if we purely went on how companies behave, then we wouldn't be dealing with any companies in America, courtesy of their government over there. I would respectfully suggest that my preference would be to continue, but if colleagues feel happy with a short deferral to involve people more, I would be happy with that.
I think where I would want to go, is a deferral to, we put in a new meeting at the end of the month, but to do something that links explicitly in a master plan way, objectives of a master plan, to link in with what this is, so that the things are together. Now, we might not be able to tie all of it down, but I think there is an argument to say that we need to be more explicit about what the outcome of this might be. Anyway, I have both Matt and Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I think I come from this from a slightly different point of view as well, and some might even say it's a liberal point of view. But it's a case of, we talked earlier today about the partnership working we're doing with the NHS. And the NHS and Delancey might think, well, they're completely different. Well, they are completely different. But what they have in a similar way is that they both have what they want, and we have what we want. And sometimes they come together, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes there's conflict, and sometimes there isn't. And I think that with Delancey having the long lease, and indeed being a freeholder on some of this site, so and that's not even so therefore have control over significant proportions of this site, them being there and being willing and looking to work together on this, and as Gerald said, putting their land they control, even land they outright own, into a vehicle where we have a say over it, I think that is something that is really positive. Now, my real fear is that if we don't move ahead with this, that the landowner, whether it be Delancey or whether it be someone else, will basically decide that Tricorn site, that core site where they've got they've had the lease since 1966, they've taken over that lease, they will just develop it on their own. And then we won't have any control over it whatsoever. They can put a planning application in which will get past the planning inspector, excuse me, it might have minimal affordable housing, in fact it very possibly would, and they could do that on their own. Because as much as we've talked about for the wider sites being something where we have to work together in with a road and all that kind of thing, on a smaller site like the Tricorn, you could do something. If you thought there was no prospect you could work together, you could do something on your own. And that's a worry, because I would not want us to end up with a community slap bang in the middle of Charles Dickens that has no relation to anything around it and is completely divorced from it. In a way that actually, way before my time on the council, to an extent we have with the Admiralty Quarter. Down in Portsea, doesn't really have any relationship to its local area, and it sits on its own. There are people who live there who never come out and have anything to do with the rest of that area, and that's not what I want to see. So I think by having Delancey being willing to work together, and us to have the say together, and us to have the say with the council is really, really important. And it could put us in a much better situation than if they, as landowners, just get fed up. So that's where I'm coming from. I agree with the pause and bringing it back at the end of the month. It's all about getting the communities together, and that I think we clearly haven't done that so far, and so that needs to be better. But we have to look at it in terms of what opportunities we've got and we can influence as a city council on behalf of residents, and of course residents therefore influence in the City Council. So I do think it's a way forward, and I think it's a way for us to get something done where we've had nothing done for a long time. And, you know, if we talk about other parts of the city, we've got Fraser Range down in Eastney.
Don't let's stray away. Let's keep on subject.
But it's just a case of sites that have been derelict, which have strong opinions.
Yeah.
That causes people a lot of anguish, and it's all about being as open as possible. And that's, I think, is the real key here.
Thank you. Ben, as Cabinet Member.
Thank you all. So I think it won't be a surprise that I'm obviously in favour of bringing this forward as the Cabinet Member responsible. I will do my best to cover the points raised by the deputies as well as other members of the Cabinet, and I'll start with the very obvious one, which is a very obvious ball has been dropped in terms of briefing and discussing this with opposition spokespeople and ward members. I absolutely take that on, and as soon as that was realised, I made every effort to make myself, and the director also made every effort to make himself available for discussion prior to this meeting. I know papers got published on Monday, late afternoon. I had a detailed text/Facebook Messenger conversation with both Cal and Claire throughout the Tuesday, and we were sat in the Cabinet meeting room going through this in detail by the Tuesday evening. I know a further meeting was booked between Claire and the director for yesterday, and for whatever reason wasn't able to go ahead, and Judith contacted me yesterday, and as soon as I received that email I gave a time and date, and we made ourselves available again this morning. So whilst I completely accept the lack of briefing ahead of time, as soon as that was realised, I hope people can appreciate that we did make ourselves available and trying to rectify that. In terms of the wider consultation piece, I did say to Cal that I think people overall are more interested in what happens in the city centre as opposed to the legal vehicle in the way that happens, and perhaps that's a naive view for me to have. But in terms of what happens to our city centre, what is the vision for that city centre, what does this joint venture deliver, there will be extensive consultation. The next step, as soon as the joint venture is created, will be to start working up a full business case, and that will be impossible to do without very detailed consultation, and we've already had some early conversations about how that might happen, including a physical spot within the city centre that anyone can just walk into, because as Natasha has said a number of times, people don't like walking to the civic offices because it's a big unyielding building, and that's absolutely true. So we do need to think about how we do our consultation. We need to think about how we speak to people and how we interact with people, because I completely agree we can't do any of this without taking people along with us, including all the people that live in Charles Dickens Ward directly next to it. As a complete aside, I wouldn't worry about your ward getting much bigger, Claire, on the basis that we're far overdue a review of ward boundaries anyway, and most of our wards probably won't exist by the time some of these buildings are built anyway. So from a personal perspective, I wouldn't worry too much on that particular point. I completely understand the early bid for maximising affordable housing. I think as an administration we've made it very clear that we want to maximise affordable housing in the city, and including council-led projects like South Community Centre site, as well as working with developers to try and make sure they don't get out of their responsibilities through viability assessments, and we've done a lot of work to make that as transparent as we can. So I think there is no query about our dedication to affordable housing. I think it is, if this joint venture does go forward, which I hope it will, it's up to the people running that joint venture on either side to make sure we get those positive outcomes for the city. So in a world where it's a Lib Dem cabinet, I like to think that as a Lib Dem cabinet we will work to ensure that whatever proposals come forward do include a significant proportion of affordable housing, as well as all those other positive outcomes that we're trying to get. So we do need to think about that carefully. And it's within our gift. I think that's the nature of a 50-50 split between the two of us, is that yes, Delancey might try to push to do something that we might consider unethical, but ultimately, because it is a 50-50 partnership, we have a veto over what they do as much as they have a veto over what we do. So whilst you could go for the this is privatising everything perspective, you can also go to the flip side and say this is renationalising everything. And I think it's very interesting. We've had a number of conversations across the council on different topics, including energy companies and housing companies, and nationally we have similar discussions about rail. Is this nationalisation, is it privatisation, or is it actually just somewhere in between where we're all trying to get something achieved, which is probably where I would say we are at, because that 50-50% 50-50 stake in this LLP going forward means that not only are we in a kind of veto position, and we have a much greater say than if Delancey were to choose to go forward with something on a smaller footprint by themselves, we also share the risk. So we share the financial risk, we share the reputational risk, we share the amount of money that we have to put into it in the first place, because redeveloping a city centre does cost money. Delancey have we have the ability to borrow money, but Delancey also have the ability to put money into it. So I think there are significant benefits to the partnership approach to doing that. Ultimately, I think this comes down to the fact that the next step, if we were to approve this either today or at a future meeting, is the creation of a full and detailed business case, which ultimately would have to get decided in this room by the Cabinet of the City Council in a public meeting. So it is not possible for the joint venture to go off and do something without the explicit consent of this City Council, and under the rules that we have for making decisions here, and this is definitely a cabinet level decision. So I hope that broadly covers the various things. The other thing to say is I think lots of references to Elephant Castle and Haringey. Haringey in particular, very, very different in terms of geography, scale, political ideals, vision for the space, both at a political level but actually at a local residence level as well. And there was a lot of toing and froing between the two main political groups in Haringey, which I think is why it failed in the way it did. I think we're in a very different space here, where we have a clear desire across party and across the city for development to happen, and it's about how we shape that development moving forward. And so I think this joint venture approach, given that Delancey are here, they have that leasehold, they are in control of the significant piece of land in our city centre, and if the options are we do nothing, therefore they come up with something by themselves, or perhaps even worse, they leave it as it is for the next 50 years, or do we take the more interventionist approach as we have with other parts of the city centre and actively try to do something? I would say that this is obviously part of a wide stream of work around the city centre. We've already had reference to 3 key streams, i.e. this, the city centre road and the city centre master plan from a wider planning perspective, but there's also a lot of smaller things we are doing that we can't visually see now, but in the months to come we will be able to visually see, and that some of those are outlined in 3.9 of the report on page 326 of the reports pack. But as well as these things, we're also looking at how we improve the public realm. We're looking at significant improvements to the area around Portsmouth Southsea train station, which is clearly a key arrival space. Whilst everyone's tired of me banging on about it, I think the demolition of the drift bar has made a significant difference to our city centre, and there are a number of things moving forward. We're soon to be improving the city centre market offer. So there is stuff happening. Some of it is very small, or you could argue is very small. Some of it is very big, or can be perceived to be very big. The final thing that I would mention is the meanwhile uses, or the how do we go from where we are now to the future development that will be there in 15 years' time. And I think we're in a position where that could be quite exciting, and we can start seeing some life back into that part of the city centre for the first time, arguably in my lifetime, which is a really depressing statement for me, caring about the city as much as I do. So I completely understand people's desire to have a potential deferral to try and tie all that together and present it better. I think the building blocks are there, and I'd like to see us approve it today, but I completely appreciate if colleagues would like a bit more time to go through the detail with everyone.
So colleagues, I think I'm going to suggest that in terms of item 11, the procurement of the contractor for the road, I don't think there's been anybody's upset about that, so I'm going to suggest that we go forward with that. In terms of item 13, I'm going to suggest that we defer that to the next meeting, and that what I would hope and expect to come back with that is more work in terms of a vision for what we're trying to do and what the master plan will look like, and to tie the things together so that people, and hopefully in those few weeks there's time for a significant amount of discussion with colleagues and local residents about the things that they want. It's because I think we need to be able to give people reassurance that the sort of vision that of the development that they're talking about is the sort of vision that will be delivered. So, Judith, sorry.
I really appreciate the discussion and the openness. I think it's been very good to get out what doesn't appear in the report is the logic behind it, and I certainly found that useful in my briefing and today.
Yeah.
For me, the absolute bottom line is that I do still think that the joint venture needs to say that we wouldn't accept any less than 30% social housing because of these viability things. And I think it might take too long to get the master plan agreed in the time that you're deferring for.
So I think what I'm looking for is the headlines that we're going to be working to within the master plan, and affordable housing clearly needs to be part of that. I don't want to prejudge what's going to be written and come back to us, but I would propose that we're sending officers away to do some more work, to come back with something that talks about not only the joint venture, but the joint venture to achieve what. Okay, so colleagues, that's two things. So on item 11, I'm going to propose that we accept that report. Colleagues, are you happy with that? On item 13, I'm suggesting to colleagues that we defer that to our next meeting, and that that we come back with a different proposal then, talking about both the joint venture, but also talking about the vision that it's meant to be creating, and that there's consultation between now and then. Colleagues, are you happy with that? Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, I think that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed, everybody, for coming, and thank you for your time.